All right, the next topic that we're going to cover is market access opportunities. In this particular topic, I want to go through a few subtopics. So, free trade agreements with Latin America, how the wages compare to Asia, logistics when it comes to sourcing from Latin America, the manufacturing, or I should say, responsible manufacturing practices in Latin America, and lastly, some of the environmental responsibility in terms of how products get made in the region. The first thing that I want to mention is the free trade agreements with Latin America. If you take a look at this graph, you will see that the US has various free trade agreements with countries in Latin America. In fact, Latin America as a region has the most free trade agreements with the United States. The first one is, of course, the United States Mexico Canada agreement, what used to be the NAFTA and now has changed to the USMCA. There's the US Chile Free Trade Agreement, the US Colombia Free Trade Agreement. Then there's this free trade agreement with various countries in Central America, including Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. There's a free trade agreement with Panama, as you can see. And lastly, there's a free trade agreement with Peru. The important advantage this gives to businesses in the US is that you have predictability, right? There's no unpredictable tariffs that are going to show up in your economics. You can have full confidence about the fact that this product is going to come free of tariffs as long as you're sourcing from that specific country. Then the next thing that I want to discuss is the wages and how the wages compare between Asia and Latin America. If you take a look at this graph, this is a recent study from Robert Fried, who used to be a consultant for McKinsey. And here we see a comparison between wages in the US, Mexico, Singapore, Malaysia, and China. Of course, you can see here the position for different I guess, workers in their own expertise and what are the wages and how they compare. If you take a look at the handwork labor, you can see that Mexico is comparable to Southeast Asia in the case of Malaysia, a little bit higher than China, although I assume that this has changed a bit recently, as China, of course, has gained more wealth and better GDP per capita. But you can see through the table that Mexico is relatively comparable to Southeast Asia and China, while being lower, of course, than the US. We wanted to show this graph because I think is important to consider the fact that Mexico, with its closeness to the US and labor wages comparable to those in Asia, can compete with Asia and propose economically viable products for American firms to sell. And that's why we've highlighted this topic as a market access opportunity. The third thing that I want to highlight in terms of the market access opportunity is the fast response logistics. I imagine that you might have been in a given scenario where you brought a lot of inventory from Asia, from China, whatever. You were doing sales and everything, but there could have been a scenario where maybe you run out of stock. Maybe your demand was coming up and you didn't have product to supply. And you were in a situation probably where you had to wait 2 to 3 months to get more inventory to sell to customers. As an e-commerce seller myself, I think that that's one of the most scary moments when you are missing out sales. You're out of stock. Here is a phenomenal advantage where Latin America can win. The average shipping time for goods coming from Latin America could be 5 to 15 days. Of course, this depends where the product is coming from. If it's coming from Mexico, much shorter because you can go via land. If it's coming from South America, you might do air, you might do sea. But of course, it's going to be a much shorter waiting time than if you were sourcing the products from Asia, where you could be waiting 90 to 120 days, depending on where you're sourcing from. Thus, we wanted to highlight the fast response logistics as an advantage that Latin America can have when compared to source information. The fourth topic that I want to highlight in terms of market access opportunities is the responsible manufacturing. I say that not in a virtue signaling way. I say that as a marketing fact that you can use to market your products. Because Latin America has protective labor laws, Look, it could be a beneficial thing for the products that you sell to tell them about those specific labor laws. For example, in my first company, Peter Henry Socks, we sell socks in the US, but the factory that we work with in Ecuador has this setup where 15% of the profits that the factory makes at the end of the year have to be shared with the workers. And in fact, they have to be shared proportional to how big their families are. So workers that have more kids might get a bigger chunk out of the profit share pool. And look, of course, these are other regulations that are outside of the scope of what happens in the US, but we do think that this kind of protective labor laws highlight the kind of responsible manufacturing that Latin America has and bring an opportunity for American brands to promote this and show that there's responsible manufacturing behind some of the products being sourced from Latin America. We think it could be an important marketing point to persuade customers to purchase. Lastly, in terms of environmental responsibility, the one thing that I want to bring up about manufacturers in Latin America is that there is a high willingness to work with materials that are more environmentally friendly. A couple of the close suppliers that we work with in Colombia and Mexico, for example, manufacture bathing suits that are made out of recycled plastic. And there's several other innovations when it comes to materials that are a little bit more friendly with the environment. Of course, this will depend on the kind of supplier that you're working with and the kind of product that you make, but we think that that's an important thing that you could take advantage of in Latin America, since there is this culture of trying to protect the environment a bit more, I would say, than in Asia.